What's up guys, this is Hippo and today I want to talk to you about a monster, Tencent. If you haven't heard of this company, well now you have. Tencent is a Chinese holding company that is a world leader in gaming and runs the largest messaging, social networking, and payments platform in China. It is a huge company. By that respect, it's probably trading at a discount compared to its counterparts in the US because it has so many moving parts at once. Look at this graph. Now look back at me. Now look at this graph again. This is insane. Look at this. So Tencent's business lines stacked up against industry-leading businesses. The payments business of Tencent is almost as big as PayPal's entire business. This was based on Q2 revenue, by the way, last year. The media ads business of Tencent is bigger than the New York Times. Tencent's games division is actually 60% higher than the world's largest standalone gaming company, which is Nintendo. Everything that it does, right, it does it big. Look at this slide. All the moving parts of Tencent, they are all either number one or not far. Online games, it is the number one platform by users in China. Number one globally by revenue. For media, it is the number one by mobile daily active users. Number one news services by monthly active users. Same thing with utilities, communication, and social. Why is it so successful? And that's because of one thing, and that's WeChat. If you haven't heard of WeChat, then now you have. WeChat is the largest social media platform in the world. China is the largest market in the world. The predominant leader there in terms of social media is WeChat, okay? WeChat has 1.2 billion monthly active users. I said monthly, okay? Billion monthly active users, which is huge. It's insane. And it's essentially the mobile operating system of the world's largest economy. WeChat users spend more time on the app than Americans spend on all their social media apps combined. It's something like 4 hours. People use it to message their friends, they use it to play games, they use it to pay for things in stores, they use it to socialize through group chats, to read the news. Everything that you do on your phone, WeChat does it. Imagine you had Facebook, Nintendo, Shopify, Snapchat, Slack, PayPal, all rolled into one company. That would be Tencent. No one else has the transaction data that WeChat does. There's a lot of people on WeChat, okay? There's more than 1 billion people there. So the traffic will attract companies to build on top of WeChat or partner with Tencent to enter China. Tencent can see who's doing well on WeChat through the transaction data, and then they can then themselves invest in the winners, which will mean that Tencent in turn will direct more traffic towards those companies on WeChat, which will in turn provide more capital to be invested in the leaders and to consolidate them. And the flywheel keeps turning and turning that way. And that's the WeChat recipe that Tencent is riding on. Chinese companies build on top of WeChat. They use WeChat to communicate with customers through official accounts. They build entire apps on top of the WeChat platform. They will accept payments through WeChat Pay. Meituan, JD.com, and Pinduoduo, those three are the largest e-commerce companies in China, along with Alibaba and Baidu and a few others. All of them were invested in by Tencent. And just those three holdings today equal more than $70 billion. And all three of those companies are all built on top of WeChat. All that transaction data, Tencent is using that to source investment. And I mean, just to have a look at Pinduoduo, which is the fastest growing e-commerce startup in the history of the world. It's been around for what, 5 years, 6 years? And in its 5th year, it's already reaching almost $5 billion in revenue. It is beating Google, Facebook, Amazon, Snapchat, and Tencent by far in terms of revenue, growth, and scale. And this company is built on top of WeChat. And those are just 3 companies, okay? But there's so many companies on WeChat. You know, WeChat obviously has a payment section. WeChat Pay brought in $12 billion last year in revenue. It does not disclose its transaction volume. So we have to guesstimate of, you know, what this really means. The industry consensus is that 2 companies control over 90% of China's electronics payment market. Alipay, or Ant, which is backed by Alibaba, or WeChat Pay, which is Tencent. And in Q1 of last year, Alipay processed roughly 50% of transaction in that quarter. Tencent respectively processed around 36%. And by the end of the fiscal year, Alipay had processed over $17 trillion in transaction. Okay, so this number is mind-boggling because, to give you an example, PayPal, the year before, had processed $170 billion. So $170 billion by PayPal and $17 trillion by Alipay. So it gives you an idea of the sheer scale and market. Alipay having roughly half of the market, WeChat Pay owns roughly a bit less than that. You can easily guesstimate the transaction volume of WeChat Pay is going to be in the trillions, in the dozens of trillions as well. Another business line of Tencent that is very exciting is the cloud business, and not necessarily for the reason that you can think of. So today in China, the cloud industry is dominated by Alibaba Cloud. Tencent has roughly 15% of the market share. Alibaba has 40. So what Tencent has been doing, which is very smart, is that they're letting Alibaba take over China, and in the meantime, they're focusing on Southeast Asia. Tencent has been expanding aggressively, so they've set up data centers in South Korea, in Japan, in Thailand, and they've recently launched one in Indonesia, which is the biggest economy in Southeast Asia and the fourth largest in the world. The majority of its population is young, and because of this, there is a massive internet penetration rate as well as mobile. So these are all really, really good factors. Now, Tencent's biggest operating business is the games industry, okay? So it is the world's biggest video game business by revenue. And how does it do that, okay? It owns stakes in a lot of companies that you might not have heard of necessarily if you're not a gamer, but you would definitely have heard of some of the games. It owns 100% of Riot Games, and you might not know Riot Games, but you know League of Legends. I mean, this game is iconic. In one quarter alone, last year, it brought in over $5 billion, just League of Legends. It owns Epic Games. You might not know Epic Games, but you definitely know Fortnite. You might not know Supercell, but you will definitely have heard of Clash of Clans. And same thing with a lot of other gaming companies. I mean, Activision Blizzard, which is one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, they do Call of Duty. That is a Tencent-owned business. They have a massive portfolio of gaming companies around the world. It even owns Roblox, which allows kids to build their own games in this virtual reality, in this virtual world. And Roblox had a very successful IPO last year. And the way it makes a lot of money through these is not only through the gaming revenue. Because these are mostly international gaming companies, they will want access to the biggest market in the world, which is China. Tencent agreed to distribute their titles in China in exchange for an investment, for owning a part of the business. And that's how they're making money. This is an unfair advantage because essentially saying that if you're a company and you want to get into China, you need to partner with Tencent. You'll see here its international investments by category. Gaming is the biggest at 44%. Now this part is why I'm so excited about Tencent. And that's nothing to do with its operating businesses. It's nothing to do with gaming or WeChat. It's actually the fact that it uses the cash flow generated from those businesses to invest in a massively growing portfolio of companies of the future. It owns more than 800 companies worldwide. That's insane. More than 70 of those companies are already listed on the stock exchange. And just have a look at this. Tencent is number 3. These are all VCs that have invested in companies that are now worth more than $1 billion. And Tencent is not a VC. Tencent is a gaming and social messaging company. It just happens to have so much cash lying around that it is investing it in the right companies. It is so good at it that it is rivaling the top VCs in the world. It is beating Sequoia Capital and Andreessen Horowitz, which are some of the largest VCs in Silicon Valley. And it says here that they're invested in more than 48 unicorn companies, but actually the Tencent leadership is saying that's more around 160. There's no way to verify that, but if that were the case, that actually puts them far ahead Tiger Global and is making them the number 1. Okay, it owns companies that you will have definitely heard of, like Tesla. It owns 5% of Tesla, 9% of Spotify, 12% of Snapchat. It owns companies like Universal Music Group, C Limited, Neo, Ola, the ride-hailing company. It owns Ubisoft. It owns UiPath, which went public a couple months ago. So it owns a lot of companies that you definitely have heard of. So they're very good at allocating their capital. These are only a very small fragment of the iceberg. There's actually nowhere online to find all 800 investments that Tencent has made. Okay, I've only gone as far as finding 100 of them. So it's just a huge monster. It's a massive company. But it has risks, okay? And there are massive risks to Tencent. So the first one is the government. Okay, the Chinese government doesn't like when the companies are getting too big and attracting too much attention. And we can see this with the Ant IPO being cancelled by the government. Alibaba wanted to list Ant, which is their payments business, on the stock exchange, and the government blocked that. Okay, because it was just getting too big. And that's why it was hit with an antitrust fine. And this is a massive risk for Chinese stocks in general. Okay, on the stock market, on Wall Street, Chinese stocks aren't loved because of this, because of the Chinese government. Tencent uses that cash that it generates to invest in companies, and a big proportion of these companies are actually outside of China. So they're using this to diversify away from this risk, from the risk of being in China. The Chinese government is very hard to predict. I mean, just recently, very recently, Tencent was hit with an antitrust fine as well, the same as Alibaba. It was roughly 6% of their yearly net income, so it was a slap on the wrist, $1.5 billion, still to show that there is a real risk here. Tencent's founder, Pony Ma, is very rarely in the public, okay? He doesn't like the spotlight, and that's the best strategy with the Chinese government, is to stay low-key. Pony Ma is rarely in public, okay? And whenever he is in public, it is usually to support the initiatives of the government. He's not like Jack Ma, okay? Jack Ma liked the spotlight. He liked being talked about. I mean, his farewell party with Alibaba, he was dressed as a rock star on stage, attracting millions and millions of views. And then all of a sudden, you know, people were asking what happened to Jack Ma. Was he kidnapped? Was he, who knows? But attention is not good. And Pony Ma understood this early on. And so he's very, very private, which is great. The next risk is that Tencent is a really hard business to value, purely for the fact that it has so many moving parts, okay? Just as operating businesses, there's a lot of different things happening with WeChat, we've got gaming. The fact that it is a early stage fund, a late stage fund, a hedge fund, and a private equity fund, and hundreds of companies that it invests in are private. Their outcomes are very hard to predict. Private companies go bankrupt all the time. A large part of Tencent's real fair value is not easy to distinguish. And that is a risk. The last risk, in terms of competition, outside of China, Tencent doesn't have a competitor, a true competitor on the same scale. However, in China, it's a different story. We have Alibaba, which is the biggest competitor. Tencent has been outperforming Alibaba and everything else for the last 6 years. So just look at this graph. The Hang Seng Index essentially tracks the largest companies in Hong Kong, and Tencent has outperformed this by 30x since 2015. And this is also why I have a lot of faith in Tencent being not only here 10 years from now, but in a much better, much bigger position than it is today, because it has proven that it can do it despite the government fines, despite Wall Street not loving it. So one thing I wanted to say is that Packy McCormick, thank you so much for your research. A lot of the information I found was thanks to him, and I really recommend you to go check out his podcast. So I have invested in Tencent, and I continue to build out my position very slowly. It's less than 2%, but I'm continuously investing in it slowly. But let me know if you want me to cover more about Tencent, or any other Chinese company, or any company for that matter. None of this is financial advice. It's purely for entertainment purposes. You need to do your own due diligence. Just let me know what you thought about the video in the comments below. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.